What if I told you that everything you believed in is a lie? This hidden reality has survived for centuries, hidden among the scorching rocks and icy night winds of the vast desert. Many consider these harsh lands completely unsuitable for normal human existence. By day, the scorching sun burns everything alive and heats the sand to unimaginable temperatures. However, with the onset of pitch-black darkness, this very same place quickly turns into a veritable ice trap. Ancient nomads understood this reality perfectly and never tried to fight nature itself. The people of the past turned the merciless temperature contrast into their primary tool for establishing a safe camp. They learned to use the features of the sandy terrain to create natural shelters from the daytime heat. The correct location of a campsite or the choice of the right dune slope literally saved entire tribes from certain death. Ancient knowledge was passed down from generation to generation and honed over millennia of harsh practice. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how skillful management of shade and wind helped overcome devastating temperature fluctuations. What I'm about to show you is banned in 12 countries because it completely shatters familiar historical myths. The camp awoke long before the first rays of the sun, when the ground still held the icy chill of the night. The early morning hours were set aside for the most strenuous physical tasks, requiring immense effort. At this time, the cool air allowed for carrying heavy loads and gathering materials without the risk of overheating. With the first glimmers of light, the camp's inhabitants began rolling the thick night covers off their dwellings. These heavy coverings reliably retained heat at night, but during the day they became an unnecessary barrier to the wind. They were quickly replaced with lightweight woven screens made of dry plant fibers. This change allowed the morning breeze to circulate freely inside each structure. By the time the sun was fully risen, the layout of the camp had visually changed due to the shifting shadows. All work areas were strictly relocated to the western side of large rock outcrops. People used every contour of the terrain to extend their working hours in comfortable conditions. The stone walls heated up slowly, creating a reliable barrier against the first scorching rays. The soil beneath their feet rapidly lost moisture, turning into a hard crust of dry dust. Camp residents sprinkled coarse sand on the main paths to reduce the clouds of dust kicked up while walking. This helped keep the air breathable during the hottest midday hours. Dust settled more quickly on the coarse grains of sand, preventing it from clogging people's airways. Preparing for the heat required a radical change in diet during the early morning hours. In the morning, only light plant-based foods were consumed, as they did not require lengthy digestion. Heavy food would cause excessive internal heat production, which in desert conditions threatened rapid exhaustion. All food was chewed thoroughly in silence and absolute stillness, without unnecessary movement. Before the midday heat set in, all tools and materials were hidden in deep earthen niches. Tools heated by the sun burned the hands and quickly became unusable due to the materials drying out. The earthen hiding places kept the work tools cool and reliably protected them from thermal deformation. These pits were covered with thick mats for complete insulation from the scorching surface air. As noon approached, activity in the camp gradually decreased to an absolute minimum. People's movements became measured and slow, so as not to waste precious moisture through sweat. The entire camp shifted into a mode of strict energy conservation and silent anticipation of the evening coolness. People took their pre-designated spots in the deepest shade of their wicker dwellings. These adaptation methods allowed for complete control over the microclimate around each inhabitant of the desert camp. Maintaining coolness depended directly on strict discipline and an understanding of the sun's path across the sky. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these methods for dealing with the morning coolness. Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. The secret, for which people pay thousands, lies in the ability to find completely invisible moisture. Water in the scorching desert never lay on the surface in the form of open lakes or rivers. People search for hidden underground reservoirs, guided by the specific color of the soil and the direction of root growth. Deep, narrow wells were dug in the low-lying areas of canyons, where the rare remnants of winter precipitation accumulated. The extracted water required a special method of storage to prevent its immediate evaporation under the sun's rays. Clay water jugs were made slightly porous, allowing microscopic droplets of moisture to rise to the surface. These droplets evaporated under the influence of the dry wind, physically cooling the entire contents of the clay jug. As a result, the water always remained cool even in the most unbearable midday heat. Containers with liquid were never placed on the scorching ground inside or outside dwellings. Special wooden tripods were constructed for them, which suspended the jugs in an area with a constant breeze. The shade from a dense canopy protected the clay from direct sunlight, and the wind enhanced the cooling effect. This simple system functioned as a natural air conditioner for the entire surrounding space. Consumption of precious water was strictly controlled and subject to unbreakable collective rules of survival. People drank in tiny sips, holding the liquid in their mouths for a long time to maximize hydration of their parched mucous membranes. Drinking large amounts at once inevitably led to heavy sweating and the loss of precious moisture. This method allowed them to get by with a minimal amount of water throughout the long, hot day. Routes for regular patrols of the territory were always planned with the locations of secret water caches in mind. Airtight jugs of water were buried in advance at strategic points in the desert in case of unforeseen circumstances. These caches saved the lives of those trackers who found themselves too far from the main camp in the heat. The exact coordinates of such caches were shared only with the most experienced and trusted members of the community. The collected water was purified using a multi-stage filtration process through layers of charcoal and fine gravel. The murky liquid from underground sources slowly seeped through these natural filters, leaving all impurities behind. Clean water collected in the lower vessel literally drop by drop, which required immense patience. This process ensured the safety of the consumed liquid in harsh climatic conditions without boiling. Moisture was extracted not only from the ground, but also from the fleshy stems of local desert plants. Their pulp was carefully crushed and pressed using special, heavy, handcrafted stone presses. The resulting plant-based liquid had a bitter taste, but was excellent at quenching even the most intense thirst. It was used during periods of severe drought when the main ground wells had completely dried up. The ability to conserve and ration water determined the success of the entire settlement for many long generations. Without this strict collective discipline, survival amid the scorching sands would have been absolutely impossible. This unique system of finding and conserving water represented the highest form of adaptation to a hostile environment. Do you think modern city dwellers could adapt to such strict rules for water consumption? A hidden code that changes everything is embedded in the complex geometry of simple desert shelters. The design of the dwellings did not include solid walls, which could have turned the interior into a scorching furnace. Instead, a system of sloping canopies was used, creating an aerodynamic tunnel to capture the slightest breeze. The lower edges of the woven walls always remained raised above the ground to draw in cool air from outside. Air currents moved according to the laws of physics, forcing hot air out through special openings in the roof. The frame was built from flexible branches, which were bound into a sturdy hemisphere capable of withstanding strong gusts of the Sirocco. This streamlined shape offered no resistance to the wind, allowing the air to flow smoothly around the structure itself. The dwelling literally breathed in unison with the desert, ensuring constant ventilation of the entire interior space. The builders designed the shade cast by these lightweight structures with remarkable mathematical precision. Layers of dry grass were laid on the roof to completely block the zenith sun while allowing diffused light to pass through. Inside, a comfortable twilight always prevailed, reliably protecting the eyes from the desert's blinding glare. The space under the canopy remained cool even at the very peak of the sun's intensity. Additional vertical screens made of tightly woven dry reeds were installed on the outside of the shelters. These outer screens absorbed the brunt of the heat, leaving the dwelling itself in a dense double shadow. A wide buffer zone of refreshing cool air was created between the screen and the house wall. This layered protection worked far more effectively than any massive monolithic stone walls. The entrance to each dwelling was always strictly oriented toward the prevailing daytime winds. This ensured a constant flow of fresh, cool air deep into the living space. A light curtain was hung in the doorway to slow the wind and prevent dust from entering. The curtain was lightly moistened with water so that the incoming hot air would be physically cooled immediately. The interior space had no unnecessary partitions or walls to obstruct the free circulation of air currents. All household items were suspended from the roof frame or securely stowed in deep underground niches. The floor was paved with smooth, flat stones that absorbed cold overnight and released it during the day. The contact of bare feet with the cool stone helped the inhabitants lower their overall body temperature. The settlement was planned so that the buildings never blocked the flow of the life-saving wind from one another. The dwellings were arranged in a strict checkerboard pattern at a considerable distance from one another. Each structure cast a long shadow, creating cool corridors for people to move through the camp. This clever layout transformed the entire area into a single giant climate control system. A deep understanding of the laws of aerodynamics allowed people to transform a deadly environment into a comfortable place to live. Their architectural solutions still amaze us with their exceptional functionality and simplicity. Be sure to like this video if you were deeply impressed by the ingenuity of ancient engineers. It motivates us to seek out even more unique historical facts about survival in the past. What we found in old archives turns our modern understanding of ancient applied engineering on its head. To lower the temperature inside the camp, effective geothermal cooling methods were actively used. Long, deep trenches were dug, covered with sturdy wooden shields and filled with a thick layer of soil. These underground earthen tunnels directed a natural cool draft straight into the central living quarters. As the air slowly passed through the deep, long trench, it quickly released its heat to the cold surrounding earth. By the time it reached the interior of the dwelling, its initial temperature had dropped by several degrees at once. This flow of cool air created a refreshing effect, even when the stones on the surface were literally melting from the heat. The earth served as an eternal and absolutely reliable cold storage for the entire large settlement. In the central part of the camp, special wide depressions were often dug in the ground for midday rest. These round pits were thickly lined with fresh, slightly damp leaves from local desert shrubs. A person could descend into such a depression and find themselves far below the level of the scorching surface air. The temperature difference between the surface and the bottom of the deep pit created ideal conditions for a peaceful afternoon nap. The open areas around the shelters were generously sprinkled with crushed white clay found in the beds of dried-up rivers. The bright white color maximally reflected the aggressive sun's rays back into the hot atmosphere. This prevented the soil around the camp from heating up to critical, life-threatening temperatures. The reflected white light gently illuminated the interior of the shelters without direct destructive thermal impact. People were highly skilled at using the effect of evaporation to quickly cool their overheated bodies. Pieces of coarse cloth soaked in precious water were applied to the neck and the inner parts of the wrists. The evaporating moisture instantly drew intense heat away from the blood, physically cooling the entire body from within. This ingenious method required a minimum of water, but provided an incredibly powerful cooling effect. Everyday clothing also served as an excellent tool for passive cooling in conditions of unbearable, intense heat. Only loose, very spacious cloaks made of light fibers that did not cling tightly to the body were worn. The loose, wide cut ensured a constant, uninterrupted exchange of air between the hot skin and the fabric. Hot air rose freely and escaped through the wide collar, carrying excess heat away with it. All monotonous daily work was moved to cool underground workshops dug into the slopes of rocky hills. In these spacious caves, the temperature remained constant year-round, providing ideal comfort for hard labor. Their tools were carefully crafted, everyday clothing was sewn, and provisions were meticulously prepared. This allowed the community's vital activities to continue uninterrupted even during the most extreme hours of the day. The use of basic laws of physics and the properties of natural materials made life in the desert entirely possible. These methods required no complex mechanisms, relying solely on observation and centuries of experience. Passive geothermal cooling reliably saved them from inevitable exhaustion under the merciless, scorching sun. Want to know how they coped with the terrible weather when the sun finally began to set? The sun's shift toward the western horizon marked the beginning of the most comfortable, yet incredibly brief period in the camp's life. Long, dark shadows from the high canyons covered the settlement, bringing long-awaited relief from the scorching direct rays. The earth began to slowly and steadily release the heat it had accumulated during the day, creating warm-up drafts. The camp instantly came to life. busily preparing for the rapid and relentless drop in nighttime temperatures. The light canopies, woven from grass, which had provided shade from the sun during the day, were quickly dismantled or rolled up. They were replaced by very thick, multi-layered coverings designed to retain internal heat for as long as possible. The frames of all dwellings were reinforced with additional wooden struts to withstand the strong, gusty night winds. People hurried to seal all ventilation openings before the onset of pitch-black, terrifying darkness. Evening twilight was the prime time for gathering fuel to sustain the vital nighttime fires. There were few trees in the rocky desert, so only dry shrubs and old roots were used. Firewood was gathered within a strict radius of the camp so as not to compromise the settlement's overall visual camouflage. The collected dry branches were neatly stacked inside shelters to protect them from the evening dew. The central evening fire was built in a deep, narrow pit to hide the tongues of bright flame from prying eyes. The earthen walls of the deep pit reflected the heat straight upward, creating a localized heating zone for the people gathered around. Thick smoke dispersed across the lowlands in thin layers, never rising high into the night sky. This ensured absolute safety and kept the camp visually invisible against the backdrop of the dark mountain ranges. People made the most of the twilight to urgently repair their clothing and sturdy footwear before the cold night watches. Sturdy hiking moccasins were reinforced with new sinew for reliable protection against sharp, icy rocks. The soles were reinforced with an additional thick layer of leather to provide better thermal insulation when walking on the ground. The cold, frozen earth was not to draw precious internal heat from the feet of the night patrols. Moisture, which had actively evaporated throughout the long day, could fall in the evening as a cold, thick fog in the lowlands. Settlements were always located slightly above the floor of the deep canyon to completely avoid this damp cold. The dry, frosty air on the high ground was much easier for the human body to tolerate than the damp, chilly air of the lowlands. The choice of a campsite always took into account these subtle microclimatic features of the complex terrain. As the colors of the evening sky rapidly deepened, the temperature dropped by several dozen degrees in literally just 1 hour. People quickly donned heavy, warm cloaks, wrapping themselves tightly against the biting, icy wind. Exposed patches of skin were generously coated with special plant-based fats for effective protection against frostbite. Preparations for the night were finally complete when the last crimson glimmers of sunset vanished entirely behind the cliffs. The transition from sweltering heat to bitter cold was an incredibly harsh test of endurance for every resident. The body had to adapt as quickly as possible from extreme cooling to maximum preservation of internal heat. Iron discipline and a clear division of evening duties helped the camp function without the slightest hitch. Ahead lay a very long, pitch black, and unbearably cold night in the merciless desert. What happens in the deep shadows of the desert at night completely and radically changes all the rules of survival. With the onset of total darkness, the ambient temperature could plummet rapidly below freezing. The huge rocks, scorched by the day's heat, were covered with prickly frost, and the icy, gusty wind pierced the body to the very bone. Methods of protection against the cold became just as complex and inventive as the methods of cooling off during the day. The main source of heat inside the enclosed dwellings was large, smooth boulders that had been heated intensely during the day. During the day, they were placed in the strongest sunlight, and late in the evening, they were carefully carried inside the dense shelters. The stones released their accumulated heat very slowly, evenly warming the enclosed, cramped space for many hours. This unique natural oven required absolutely no firewood and produced no telltale acrid smoke. The floor inside each structure was thickly covered with a layer of dry, soft grass to create an air cushion. On top of this grass, dense, heavy blankets were carefully laid to create the most comfortable resting area possible. This multi-layered floor insulation reliably blocked the icy cold emanating from the rapidly freezing stony ground. People slept huddled very closely together to completely minimize heat loss in the darkness. The heat from ordinary human breath was also used as effectively as possible to warm the interior of the shelter. The thick, impermeable walls prevented moisture from escaping, creating a sort of warm greenhouse effect inside. The air inside became quite warm and humid, which made breathing much easier in the intense, dry cold. A small ventilation hole at the very top of the structure prevented the buildup of excess cold condensation. On the harshest, coldest nights, people actively used special individual sleeping bags made of soft materials. These sleeping bags were tightly stuffed with dry moss, which served as an excellent natural, porous insulator. A person would climb completely into such a bag, head first, leaving only a very small, narrow slit for air to enter. This ensured that their body temperature was reliably maintained right up until the freezing morning. Night watchmen who remained outside in the cold constantly used the technique of continuous movement to keep warm. They never stood still but slowly patrolled the area, actively circulating blood through their veins. Their cloaks had a special wide cut that did not restrict movement, but reliably protected against piercing gusts of wind. Constant, measured movement was the absolute key to survival in conditions of extreme open-air cold. In severe cold, hunting equipment required special care, as the wood became very brittle. Hunting bows were always kept warm under the hunter's clothing to prevent them from snapping when suddenly drawn at a critical moment. The sharp stone arrowheads were carefully coated with a thin layer of fat to prevent the formation of brittle ice. All necessary equipment had to be fully ready for immediate use at any moment. Drinking water for the entire long night was stored deep inside the dwelling so that it would not freeze and shatter the clay jugs. If the precious liquid did form a thin crust of ice, it was carefully melted with the warmth of the hands before consumption. Ice-cold water could easily cause severe internal hypothermia, which was extremely dangerous for a weakened body. Thermoregulation depended directly on the correct, comfortable temperature of the food consumed. Survival in a nighttime frost camp was a constant, exhausting struggle against heat loss at every possible level. Every aspect of nighttime life was strictly subordinated to the single goal of conserving as much energy as possible until the saving dawn. Want to know exactly how they constructed their incredibly warm shelters for the harshest frosts? The design of these enclosed nighttime shelters represented a true triumph of practicality over the harsh climate. Lightweight frame structures, which served as ventilated canopies during the day, transformed into fully insulated capsules at night. Every tiny gap between the layers of the outer cladding was carefully plugged with bundles of dry, twisted grass. This reliably prevented even the slightest escape of heated air into the open space of the icy, frozen desert. The thick, dense coverings used for the roof were always laid with the fuzzy side facing the interior. The fuzz created an excellent air cushion that superbly retained the heat radiated by the sleeping human bodies. The smooth outer side of these coverings easily repelled the piercing gusts of the strong, cold wind. This ingenious two-sided protection functioned just like a modern insulating membrane material. In the very center of the most spacious shelter, a special hidden, deep underground hearth was sometimes constructed. The pit for the night fire had a very narrow neck and a wide base, resembling a pot-bellied jug in shape. At the very bottom, embers from hardwoods smoldered, giving off plenty of heat but no bright flames or acrid smoke. This hearth evenly warmed the ground around it, creating a warm, comfortable floor for the entire long night. All the sleeping inhabitants were arranged strictly in a circle, with their feet pointing toward the main source of heat in the center of the shelter. This position ensured the most even warming of the extremities, which always freeze the fastest in the cold. The upper body was additionally covered with multiple layers of clothing and personal heavy camping cloaks. The tight circular arrangement of people allowed them to effectively share their own body heat with one another during the coldest hours. If the piercing night frost became completely unbearable, the ancient technique of hot sand was used. Fine, clean sand was heated intensely near hot coals, then poured into small, tight leather pouches. These pouches were pressed tightly against the chest or hidden under clothing for quick and effective localized warmth. The sand retained its high temperature for a very long time, releasing it extremely slowly to the frozen human body. Inside all night shelters, absolute ringing silence was always maintained so that people could hear any sounds from outside. The howling of the strong wind masked the footsteps of strangers, so keen hearing was the primary tool for nighttime safety. Thick sound insulation from the coverings slightly muffled the constant roar of the storm, creating a relatively quiet acoustic environment. People rested with their eyes closed, without losing their inner vigilance for even a single minute. Early in the morning, when the bitter cold had not yet receded, they tried to preserve the shelter's internal warmth for as long as possible. Going outside was always done strictly one person at a time through a very narrow opening, which was closed immediately. This prevented the dwelling from becoming catastrophically cold due to a sudden gust of the morning's frosty, icy air. A minimal supply of life-saving warmth always remained inside for those who were finishing their preparations. To reliably insulate essential household items from the frozen ground, suspended structures made of straps were used. Tools, provisions, and clothing hung securely on a wooden frame, making absolutely no contact with the cold stone floor. This protected all items from the accumulation of damp condensation and the formation of destructive frost on their surfaces. When kept dry, any natural materials lasted much longer and retained their original properties completely. Particular attention was always paid to protecting the supply of dried provisions from the moisture that seeped in at night. Food supplies were stored in very tightly tied bags, generously coated with a thin layer of animal fat. The fat effectively repelled any moisture, preventing the valuable food from becoming damp and covered with destructive mold. Proper, careful storage of provisions was absolutely essential for the community's physical survival in difficult times. Every resident of the vast camp knew exactly where they belonged in the night shelter and strictly adhered to energy conservation rules. Personal, self-serving comfort was always strictly subordinated to the common goal of collective survival in an extreme environment. The ability to retain internal heat made the large settlement independent of the harsh vagaries of the nighttime desert. A reliable, warm shelter was a true fortress, successfully withstanding the invisible, merciless enemy, the cold. Guarding the sleeping camp in conditions of zero visibility and incredibly intense cold required exceptional skill. The night patrols moved through the territory absolutely silently, blending completely with the deep shadows cast by rocky outcrops. Their main task was not only to detect external threats, but also to strictly monitor the settlement's visual camouflage. Not a single accidental glint of coal or quiet murmur of a voice was to reveal the community's exact location. The sentries' routes were planned very carefully in advance and were never repeated to avoid predictability. They circled the entire camp in an incredibly wide arc, using natural elevations for a better view of the surrounding terrain. In pitch darkness, the eyes quickly adjusted to detect the slightest changes in silhouettes against the backdrop of the starry night sky. An experienced night scout could spot a slight movement hundreds of meters away by the distortion of the distant horizon. To coordinate communication between sentries, quiet sound signals were used, mimicking the sound of the night wind or the crackling of dry branches. These code sounds blended seamlessly into the completely natural acoustic backdrop of the frozen desert at night. An untrained outsider would never have been able to distinguish a short code signal from the real sounds of the harsh wilderness. This incredibly complex system of sound codes allowed important information to be transmitted without a single spoken word. The changing of the frozen guard took place deep in the night, guided by the invisible yet precise internal biological clock of the human body. The sentries, frozen to the bone, returned very quietly to their warm shelters, yielding their places to their comrades who had warmed up. The handover of an important post was always accompanied by an extremely brief whisper about any microscopic changes in the surroundings that had been noticed. Every tiny detail, from a shift in wind direction to a change in humidity, was of immense importance. All the night sentries were highly trained to navigate the vast expanse solely by the position of the constellations. The desert's perfectly clear sky served as a highly accurate map, allowing them to find the direct path back to camp without fail. Knowledge of complex stellar routes saved those brave souls who were forced to venture far into the terrifying darkness. Their compass was fully replaced by an excellently trained visual memory and the vast experience of their ancestors. If any suspicious activity was detected, the sentry never engaged in direct, open confrontation. His main task was to retreat completely unnoticed and silently warn the sleeping camp of the impending danger. To achieve this, they constantly used a special running stride with a soft roll of the foot that raised absolutely no dust. This special movement technique conserved physical energy and ensured absolute, ringing nighttime silence. The piercing cold of the night was the greatest challenge for the scouts sitting motionless in a hidden ambush. To prevent themselves from freezing solid, they used special techniques of static muscle tension to get their blood flowing. Deep, rhythmic breathing through the nose warmed the icy air before it reached the lungs. Under these conditions, controlling one's own freezing body was elevated to the highest art. To reliably mask the scent of the human body, all sentries rubbed their clothing generously with ashes and dry, fragrant herbs. This instantly threw off any enemy trackers who relied solely on their keen sense of smell to navigate in the dark. The camp literally dissolved into the natural sense of the desert, becoming its completely invisible, integral part. Perfect, silent integration into the natural environment guaranteed 100% safety for the entire settlement. The entire vast perimeter was guarded not only by people, but also by ingenious passive barriers made of thorny, hard shrubbery. Dry, long branches with very sharp thorns were laid along the narrowest paths leading to the main shelters. Stepping on such a fragile branch in the dark, an uninvited guest would inevitably make a loud, telltale noise. This served as an incredibly reliable and simple early warning system for the secret approach of any strangers. Until the very first light of dawn, the entire camp was under the ultra-reliable protection of these invisible, silent guards. Their utmost professionalism and iron composure ensured a peaceful, safe rest for the entire community before another difficult day. When the very first rays of the sun began to illuminate the tops of the canyons, the incredible tension of the night watch finally subsided. It was time for a peaceful handover to the exhausting daytime cycle of complex desert survival. In the desert environment, everyday clothing served as a complex, multi-layered system designed to protect the body. The guiding principle behind the clothing was a strict layering system, which allowed for easy adaptation to extreme temperature fluctuations. During the day, all unnecessary warm layers were removed, leaving only a thin, light layer of sun protection, and at night they were put back on. All clothing was painstakingly sewn from readily available natural materials that had been specially chemically treated. Soft, durable suede, obtained through a lengthy tanning process, was the primary material for shirts and pants. The process of tanning thick leather always included prolonged cold smoking to give it powerful water-repellent properties. Such treated suede did not harden at all in severe frost and remained soft even after becoming completely soaked. It provided excellent body temperature regulation and reliably protected the skin from scratching, prickly, dry plants. To protect against very strong, biting winds, heavy, long capes were worn over light clothing. These thick capes fastened securely over one shoulder with special bone buckles, leaving both hands completely free. The wide, thick collar could be raised to completely and securely cover the neck and back of the head from the icy draft. At night, such a heavy cloak served as an excellent, very warm personal camping blanket for sleeping. Practical footwear was designed with constant movement over scorching rocks and the prickly, dry stubble of the canyons in mind. Moccasins had a very thick, multi-layered sole, curved far upward at the edges to protect the toes from impact. The upper part of such footwear always remained very soft and fit snugly around the ankle, preventing sand from getting inside. In winter, thick insoles made of dry grass were always placed deep inside the moccasins for additional internal warmth. The edges of all outer garments were generously adorned with very long fringe, which served an important practical function of wicking away moisture. During heavy rain or heavy dew, drops of icy water would run down the long strips of leather directly to the ground. This prevented the main central part of the garment from getting soaked through and helped preserve precious body heat. The long fringe also visually broke up a person's silhouette, helping them blend in better with the dry underbrush. The color palette of all the garments consisted exclusively of muted natural shades of ochre, brown, and dusty gray. These faded colors blended perfectly with the scorched desert landscape, making a person completely invisible from a distance. Bright contrasting elements were completely absent, as they could attract unwanted attention in open, visible terrain. Deep practicality was always and in everything, placed far above any external decorative appeal. To securely fasten loose clothing, very sturdy belts made of thick woven leather or plant fibers were used. All the small items and survival tools necessary for daily life in the harsh wilderness were hung from this wide belt. This completely freed up both hands and allowed one to always carry the most important work or hunting equipment. A tightened belt also helped regulate the volume of outerwear for better retention of body heat. All seams on the clothing were made incredibly strong, using thin, dried, sturdy tendons. The tendons softened slightly during sewing and then dried, tightly and permanently binding the pieces of thick leather together. Such tight seams completely blocked the icy wind and did not come apart even under the most extreme physical exertion. High-quality hand sewing ensured the incredible durability of all gear in harsh hiking conditions. Headwear varied greatly from light fabric bandages to very thick, warm hats, depending on the season. The light bandages excellently absorbed the stinging sweat from the forehead, completely preventing it from running into the eyes during intense work. Deep winter hats covered the ears and the back of the head very tightly, reliably protecting the parts of the head most vulnerable to the cold. Head protection was always critical for preventing heat stroke during the day and severe hypothermia at night. Everyday clothing served as a reliable second skin, completely isolating the person from the hostile, deadly environment. Its meticulous creation required a very deep knowledge of the hidden properties of natural materials and an understanding of human physiology. Properly selected layered clothing allowed all desert dwellers to calmly ignore extreme temperature fluctuations. It was a perfect example of harmony between human physical needs and the harsh natural environment. The most unbearably cold time of day came just before the long-awaited appearance of the first rays of sunlight. The air became crystal clear, and the frozen ground was finally covered with a very thick layer of white, icy frost. The entire vast camp lay in a state of deep torpor, desperately conserving the last remnants of precious warmth. The frozen night patrols prepared to hand over their critical posts and head to warm shelters for their long-awaited rest. The very first rays of the huge sun, touching the tops of the canyons, served as the main signal for the start of a new day. People slowly emerged from their cramped shelters to joyfully expose their faces to the faint but invigorating morning warmth. This very brief moment of comfort allowed the body to relax after an exhausting, intense struggle against the night frost. The camp gradually filled with the quiet, measured sounds of morning footsteps and the soft rustle of heavy skins being spread out. The bright morning light instantly revealed all the traces left by the night wind and the sharp drop in temperature. A very quick visual inspection of the entire perimeter was conducted, along with a thorough check of the integrity of all protective structures. The covers that had sheltered the dwellings were removed and carefully laid out on flat stones to dry from the night's condensation. All moisture had to evaporate completely before the relentless onset of the exhausting midday heat. The remaining embers in the underground hearths were carefully stoked to prepare a quick early morning meal. Breakfast consisted of reheated leftovers from the evening meal and hot herbal tea to quickly restore strength. The nutritious food provided the body with energy for the most strenuous physical labor, which had to be completed before the heat set in. Every resident understood that the brief period of comfortable morning coolness was rapidly and irrevocably slipping away. People set to work again on the painstaking task of collecting morning dew and replenishing all the hidden reserves of clean, cold water. All the jugs were carefully checked for microscopic cracks that might have formed due to the moisture freezing overnight. Every drop of water collected was meticulously accounted for to ensure the camp's basic needs were met for the coming hot day. The entire local logistics system operated flawlessly, drawing on the community's vast, long-standing experience. Work tools were retrieved from cool underground caches, and preparations began for the repair of building materials. The lightweight woven screens taken down the previous evening were quickly returned to their places, forming canopies to provide shade. Right before our eyes, the camp changed its layout, skillfully adapting to the approaching intense heat of the sun. The settlement's daytime configuration always differed strikingly from the tight ring of closed, warm shelters at night. Scouts set out through the cool, winding canyons in hopes of finding useful plant resources before the heat of the day set in. The early, cool morning was the most productive and safest time to search for resources across the vast desert terrain. Their mandatory return was strictly required before noon to avoid the risk of heat stroke on the way. The life of the entire vast camp was completely synchronized with the relentless rhythm of the sun's inexorable movement across the sky. As the bright sun rose higher and higher, the shadows cast by the tall cliffs rapidly shortened. The scorching air began to shimmer intensely from the rising heat, blurring the sharp contours of the distant horizon. The camp's inhabitants quickened the pace of their work, striving to finish all their outdoor tasks as quickly as possible. The moment was inexorably approaching when the entire surface of the earth would once again turn into a scorching frying pan. The endless cycle of life in the harsh climate constantly demanded tremendous endurance and impeccable inner discipline. These people did not try to conquer nature. They learned to exist in complete harmony with its very cruel rules. Each new dawn was undeniable proof of their strength and incredible ability to adapt to impossible conditions. The harsh desert was by no means their enemy, but rather the strictest and fairest teacher of survival. When the merciless sun finally reached its zenith, the vast camp once again plunged into saving shade and silent anticipation. All active life came to a standstill, giving way to passive cooling and the strict conservation of the body's internal physical resources. Another inevitable turn of the endless wheel of time came to a close amid the boundless, scorching, dusty sands. These strong people conquered the heat and the cold, turning their knowledge into a flawless tool for daily survival. What do you think of the topic of survival in the harsh desert climate? Suggest topics for future videos you'd like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos.